The treasure hidden from the crowd has never been lost. It has only been concealed from untrained eyes because there is a spiritual law that governs value, and it declares that what is infinitely rare is never discovered by the masses, but only by the one who carries the map within their own soul. And you have been walking with that map even when you did not understand the terrain, even when the landscape of your life felt barren, even when the silence of unanswered prayers echoed louder than applause ever could, because your loneliness was never evidence of unworthiness. It was evidence of preservation. It was a vault season where heaven closed the doors not to deny you love, but to protect your value from being mishandled by those who could not comprehend it. And while others were chasing noise, you were being refined in quiet your integrity, compounding like unseen interest, your character forming in pressure, your heart stretched yet not shattered. And now a convergence is unfolding that was scripted before you took your first breath. Not coincidence, but alignment, not accident, but appointment. And if this message resonates in your spirit, I want you to act in agreement with it right now, like this message as a declaration that you accept divine timing. Subscribe as your signal that you are stepping into this higher alignment, and comment the number 77 as your public affirmation that you're ready to receive what was prepared for you long before you knew to ask. Because this is not passive listening, this is activation, and you are not here by chance. You're here because the season has shifted and the treasure is about to be revealed to the one who carries the map. As divine recognition and heavenly vindication begin to unfold in your life, you must understand that your story has never been random, but written along a spiritual timeline that existed before your first memory. A timeline where certain encounters were permitted and others were blocked, where certain doors opened only to teach you discernment and others closed to teach you strength. And for much of your life, you have walked feeling like a coded message in a room full of people who did not have the cipher, living as a secret that only you sensed but could not explain, because your perception ran ahead of your circumstances, and that created friction, a constant dissonance between who you were becoming and how you were being treated. And those who were spiritually unaware misjudged your light, not because it was dim, but because it was too bright for their comfort. They called you too intense or too distant, too ambitious or too sensitive, not realizing they were trying to measure an ocean with a teaspoon. And every time you chose integrity over convenience, every time you refused to shrink to make someone else feel taller, something was being recorded in what can only be described as a celestial ledger, a spiritual accounting where no act of authenticity goes unnoticed, where the nights you stayed faithful to your growth instead of numbing your pain were documented, where the silent prayers whispered into darkness were archived, where the moments you forgave when revenge would have been easier were etched into eternal memory. And while the world evaluated you based on temporary metrics, heaven evaluated you based on internal alignment. And there comes a point when the verdict is released, when the judgment shifts from testing to reward, from preparation to presentation. And that is where you stand now, at the threshold of being seen not superficially but accurately, recognized not for what you perform but for who you are. And when this person enters your life, it will not feel like a beginning but like a continuation, like a conversation paused long ago, now resuming without awkwardness because their spirit already understands your file, already senses the journey written between your lines, and there will be no need for games or posturing, no choreography of pretending to be more impressive or less vulnerable, because recognition at a soul level bypasses performance, it bypasses ego, it bypasses strategy and lands directly in truth. And you will notice that the usual anxiety that accompanies new attraction will be absent, replaced instead by a quiet certainty, a grounded calm that feels almost ancient, as if your nervous system is exhaling after years of vigilance. Because this is not chemistry born of chaos, but resonance born of alignment. And the heavenly vindication is not about proving others wrong, but about placing you in the presence of someone whose clarity affirms what you always knew about yourself. Someone who sees your scars as strength and your solitude as sovereignty. someone who recognizes that your difference was never deficiency, but design. And in that recognition, you will feel something profound, a restoration of narrative, a rewriting of every false story that tried to define you as too much or not enough. Because now you're standing in a moment where the secret is no longer hidden, where the value stored in the vault is being brought into the light, not to be consumed by the crowd, but to be honored by the one who carries the matching key. As the focus shifts toward understanding the one the world desires, you must first realize that this counterpart is not admired for shallow reasons alone, but for a gravitational presence that extends beyond appearance or wealth. Because while they may possess beauty or influence, what truly draws people is the quiet authority they carry, the kind that does not demand attention yet commands it. They're architects of reality, individuals who look at obstacles and see blueprints, who approach challenges not with panic but with precision, who build structures in business, creativity or leadership that others struggle even to conceptualize. And this ability makes them highly sought after, surrounded by admirers who want proximity to power, by strategists who want to attach themselves to success, by polished personalities who have memorized the language of charm but lack the depth of sincerity. And over time, this constant stream of attention has created a fatigue within them, not because they dislike admiration, but because they can sense the motive behind it. They can detect when someone wants their status more than their soul, when someone is impressed by the kingdom, but uninterested in the king or queen who built it. And this discernment has been forged through experience, through years of filtering shallow connections, through encounters where the conversation sparkled, but the substance was hollow, through invitations that felt flattering but energetically empty. And while the world views them as a prize, they have often felt isolated within that perception, admired yet misunderstood, desired yet unseen, because being wanted for what you produce is not the same as being valued for who you are. And so they have become selective, not cynical but wise, not closed but careful, guarding their core not out of fear but out of respect for their own worth. And in that careful waiting, they have been searching not for a fan but for a co-ruler, not for someone who needs their light to shine, but for someone who carries a powerful light of their own, someone whose presence does not compete but complements, someone whose independence removes the burden of being the sole pillar. And this is where your journey intersects with theirs, because while others approach them with agendas, you approach with authenticity. While others seek advantage, you embody alignment, and to someone accustomed to being pursued for utility, your lack of ulterior motive feels revolutionary. It feels like fresh air in a room thick with performance, and they will recognize that you're not captivated by their empire, but curious about their essence, not impressed by their influence, but attentive to their integrity. And this distinction will matter more than you can imagine, because beneath the admiration of the crowd lies a human being longing for real partnership, longing to remove the armor required to navigate constant scrutiny, longing to sit beside someone who understands that success is not the ultimate goal but shared purpose is, and that longing has been quietly directed toward a frequency that matches their own, a frequency you carry, not because you tried to, but because you were forged in similar fires, shaped by similar isolation, strengthened by similar refusal to settle. And so, despite the world wanting them, despite the line of suitors and the polished overtures, the only presence that will truly satisfy their discernment is yours. Because you're not chasing their throne, you're building your own, and in that mutual sovereignty lies the foundation for a union that is not transactional but transformational, not performative but powerful, a partnership where two architects of destiny finally recognize in each other the one thing the world could not counterfeit: authenticity aligned with purpose. As the truth deepens, and the question rises of why, out of an entire world of polished faces and strategic suitors, you are the only one who truly fits the answer, unfolds not in flattery but in frequency, because your authenticity is not a personality trait. It is a vibration forged through fire, and to someone who has spent years navigating a sea of curated personas, your presence feels like a clear signal cutting through static, a rare transmission that does not distort itself to be accepted, and this rarity is not accidental. It was earned through hardship that refined you rather than reduced you, because every betrayal that could have made you bitter instead made you discerning. Every disappointment that could have made you cynical instead made you wiser. Every season of isolation that could have made you desperate instead made you whole. And wholeness is the most magnetic force in existence to someone who has grown tired of managing fragile egos and unfinished souls. You do not arrive in their life seeking rescue or elevation. You arrive complete, not perfect, but integrated, not flawless, but aware. And that integration creates a safety they have rarely experienced. Because when a person of influence meets someone who wants nothing from them, no access, no leverage, no validation, it disrupts the entire power dynamic they are accustomed to. Suddenly, they are not being pursued for advantage, but appreciated for essence, and your lack of agenda becomes the most powerful statement you could make. It tells them you're not impressed by the throne, but interested in the sovereign, not dazzled by the empire, but curious about the architect, and that curiosity is clean, free of hidden contracts, free of expectation, free of hunger, and for someone who has constantly been consumed by others' desires, this energetic cleanliness feels revolutionary. It feels like sanctuary, and sanctuary is where real intimacy is born. Because you're not trying to extract from them, you are simply standing in your own light, building your own mission, tending to your own calling, and that independence reverses the gravitational pull they are used to. Instead of people orbiting them, hoping to gain warmth from their fire, they find themselves drawn to yours, not out of competition, but out of recognition. Because your blueprint is not common, it is untraceable. You've never followed a standard template for success, never fit neatly into predefined boxes. And that used to make you feel like an outsider, as if you were running advanced software in a world still operating on outdated systems, creating misunderstandings and friction. But what you could not see then is that your untraceable design was intentional. It was crafted for a specific alignment, because a lock designed for a rare key will not open for generic tools. And countless people in your past tried to access your heart with flattery, manipulation, projection, or expectation, and they failed not because you were closed, but because they were incompatible. And in the same way, countless admirers have attempted to access your counterpart with charm status or strategy, and they too failed, because compatibility at this level is not about surface similarity, but about soul architecture. It is about matching internal schematics that were drafted long before either of you understood your assignment, and this is why when the meeting occurs it will not feel like effort but inevitability, not like persuasion but alignment, because at a design level you fit your strengths, balancing their vulnerabilities, your intensity meeting their ambition, your depth answering their discernment, and despite the countless other options surrounding them, the connection with you will stand apart with a clarity that cannot be manufactured, because inevitability at a soul level overrides abundance at a surface level. And while others may offer beauty, intelligence, or opportunity only, you offer resonance, and resonance cannot be negotiated or substituted. It either exists or it does not. And between you it will exist in a way that feels both startling and ancient, as if two parallel journeys have finally intersected at the precise coordinate written into your spiritual timeline, proving that destiny does not compete, it converges. And this convergence was protected long before you recognized it. Which brings you to understand that what once felt like rejection was in truth sacred quarantine, a season not of abandonment but of preservation, because every romantic disappointment you endured was not random heartbreak but filtration, a system designed to remove what could contaminate your path. And when you revisit those memories now, you can begin to see the pattern, the partners who belittled your dreams, the ones who subtly tried to shrink your ambition so they could feel secure, the ones who withheld affection to maintain control. They were not proof that you were unlovable. They were proof that you were being shielded because had you remained tethered to them, your timeline would have narrowed your potential, diluted your vision, compromised, and so heaven intervened not with fireworks but with friction, allowing incompatibility to surface so that attachment would break before damage became permanent, and those departures, as painful as they were acts of spiritual sanitation, removing energetic viruses of jealousy, insecurity, manipulation, disbelief before they could infect your destiny, and each heartbreak functioned as training, each betrayal, strengthening your emotional musculature, teaching you boundaries, teaching you self-respect, teaching you how to differentiate between attention and affection, between intensity and intimacy, and you were tested in moments where it would have been easier to shrink, to settle, to accept less, in exchange for temporary comfort. And every time you chose sovereignty over safety, you passed an unseen exam affirming to the universe that you would not trade your birthright for a counterfeit version of love, and those tests built immunity. A spiritual immune system that now detects inauthenticity instantly, that now recognizes red flags without rationalizing them away, that now feels energetic mismatch before logic tries to justify it, and that immunity is what qualifies you for equal partnership, because you cannot co-rule an empire with someone. If you're still vulnerable to manipulation, you cannot stand beside power if you're still negotiating your worth, and so the quarantine was necessary, the solitude essential, the silence formative within those four walls, where you felt most alone. You are actually becoming sovereign, learning to validate yourself without applause, learning to trust your intuition without confirmation, learning to sit with your own company and find it not empty but sacred. And that inner sovereignty is what now allows you to meet this counterpart not as a supplicant but as an equal, not as someone seeking completion but as someone offering partnership and graduation from isolation. Does not mean you will never experience loneliness again. It means you no longer fear it. It means you know you can survive it without compromising your standards. And that confidence shifts your entire relational posture, because now you approach connection from fullness rather than lack, from clarity rather than confusion. And this shift signals that the quarantine is lifting, not because you are desperate for companionship, but because you are ready for collaboration, ready to merge strength with strength, vision with vision, light with light. And when you look back, you will realize that nothing was wasted. Not the tears, not the waiting, not the nights you questioned your worth. All of it was preparation. All of it was filtration. All of it was protection disguised as delay. And now that protection transforms into permission to engage with someone whose presence amplifies rather than diminishes you, whose admiration does not intimidate but inspires, whose ambition does not compete but complements. And you will understand that the sacred quarantine was the most loving strategy ever enacted on your behalf, because it ensured that when the one the world desires finally stands before you, they encounter not a fragmented version of yourself, but the fully integrated sovereign you were always meant to become, ready, not just to be chosen, but to choose in return. As the sacred quarantine lifts and you step into readiness, what begins next is subtle yet undeniable, because the ripple of arrival does not start with a dramatic entrance, but with a shift in atmosphere, a change in current that you feel before you can explain, as if the air itself has recalibrated around you, because when a destined counterpart moves into proximity, their energy often enters your field before their physical form does, and this is not fantasy, but frequency two aligned vibrations beginning to register one another across distance. And the first evidence of this alignment is rarely external spectacle, but internal movement, a soft disturbance in the waters of your perception, a heightened awareness that something is converging. And then the synchronicities begin, not chaotic but precise. Repeated numbers appearing at moments of reflection, 1111 222 707. Not as superstition but as rhythmic punctuation. Little cosmic taps on the shoulder that say pay attention. Conversations overheard that mirror your private thoughts. Strangers articulating themes you are contemplating in solitude, lyrics surfacing in random playlists that speak directly to reunion destiny, waiting being over, and you begin to notice patterns that feel too coordinated to dismiss, not because you're searching for them, but because they are searching for you, appearing in license plates, receipts, timestamps, and the repetition becomes intentional rather than accidental. And alongside these numerical breadcrumbs come physical markers that feel almost ceremonial. A feather in an unexpected place, a hawk circling overhead at a moment of clarity, a butterfly landing on your hand as if pausing to acknowledge your transition, small but precise signs that the natural world itself is responding to a shift in your spiritual ecosystem. Because alignment at this level does not remain confined to thought. It echoes through environment, and even in the digital realm you feel guided, a sudden intuitive pull to explore a certain profile, to revisit a name you have heard 3 times in unrelated context, to click on something that normally would not capture your attention, and the nudge is gentle, not obsessive, not frantic, but curious, calm, as if your spirit is guiding your awareness toward a coordinate that has just been activated. And yet the most powerful sign is not external at all. It is internal peace, a profound quieting of the low-grade anxiety that once hummed beneath your desire for partnership. Because for years there may have been a subtle tension in your body, a question mark hovering over your romantic future, a sense of searching, even if quiet. But suddenly that search subsides, not because you have given up, but because something in you knows the answer is en route, and your nervous system reflects this knowing before your logic catches up. Shoulders relaxing, breath deepening, sleep becoming more restorative, as if your cells themselves recognize a familiar frequency and shift out of vigilance. And this biological recognition is not infatuation, it is safety. Your body discerning that a threat is not approaching but a match. And in that safety, creativity surges, ideas flow in more freely, inspiration rising unexpectedly, as if their energy is activating dormant circuits within you, awakening aspects of your purpose that require partnership to fully ignite. And then the dreams begin vivid, emotionally charged, not always showing a clear face, but unmistakably carrying a presence, a voice, a feeling of being held, of walking beside someone through landscapes that feel both new and ancient, and you wake from these dreams not confused but comforted, carrying an emotional afterglow that lingers through the day, and you understand that these are previews, energetic rehearsals preparing your psyche for the physical encounter, teaching your system to recognize what your spirit already knows. Because the ripple of arrival is not chaos but confirmation, not fantasy but frequency aligning in real time. And when that frequency finally condenses into physical meeting, what unfolds next is defined not by fireworks, but by silence. Because the silent knowing that marks your first encounter will surprise you in its simplicity, as the usual internal chatter that accompanies attraction simply fails to appear the questions of whether you are impressive enough, attractive enough, interesting enough, dissolving into irrelevance, replaced by a steady hum of recognition. And you find yourself speaking without rehearsing, listening without strategizing, existing without performing, because the conversation flows not from a desire to convince, but from a place of mutual curiosity, and the safety you feel is immediate, almost startling, as if your nervous system has found its counterpart and down-regulated into rest. And this regulation is proof of compatibility far deeper than chemistry. Because trauma bond connections often feel electric but destabilizing, intense yet anxious, whereas soul alignment feels grounding, expansive yet calm, and you will notice the difference in your body. Your heart beats steady rather than racing, your breath even rather than shallow, your mind clear rather than hyper-analyzing. And this calm does not mean lack of attraction but abundance of trust. Because trust at this level is intuitive, not negotiated, and in their presence you sense no threat to your authenticity, no subtle pressure to shrink or exaggerate, no need to adjust your volume or filter your intensity. And when you reveal parts of yourself once misunderstood, they do not flinch, they lean in fascinated. celebrating what others once criticized, and you realize you're speaking a language that requires no translation. References landing effortlessly, values aligning without debate, humor shared without effort, and even in moments of silence there is no awkwardness, only comfort. Because the primary communication is energetic, your spirits conversing beneath the surface of words, and you recognize that the usual stages of dating feel almost unnecessary. The games of waiting days to respond, the calculated withholding of affection to maintain leverage. These behaviors seem childish in the presence of clarity, because when resonance is undeniable, ambiguity loses its appeal and you both sense that you're not strangers beginning, but allies reuniting ancient partners converging for a present mission, and the distinction between trauma bond chemistry and soul alignment becomes unmistakable trauma. Bonds often mirror unresolved wounds, creating intensity through chaos, while soul alignment mirrors growth, creating stability through clarity. And this connection will feel less like a whirlwind and more like coming home, less like a spark and more like a steady flame that does not flicker with insecurity. And in that steady flame, you understand that what you are holding out for was not perfection but resonance, not excitement alone but peace. And as this peace solidifies, the relationship begins to reveal its true purpose, because the kingdom of two that forms from this union is not an escape from life, but an elevation within it. Not a fairy tale conclusion, but an assignment, a strategic alliance, orchestrated not merely for personal happiness, but for collective impact. And when two sovereign individuals merge, they do not diminish into codependency, but multiply into momentum, their strengths interlocking like gears, turning more powerfully together than separately. And where you are visionary, they are strategist. Where you are healer, they are builder. Where you are intuitive, they are structural. And this complementary design transforms your partnership into a force, not through dominance, but through alignment. And you begin to notice that projects once stalled accelerate. Ideas once vague crystallize, doors once closed open with surprising ease, because your combined frequency generates a field that attracts opportunity and repels interference. And this multiplication of power is not about ego, but about effectiveness, about executing purpose with greater precision. And publicly, this union becomes its own testimony, not as a display of superiority, but as a quiet recalibration of narrative. Those who once doubted you now forced to reconcile their assumptions with reality, witnessing you beside someone they admire and realizing their misjudgment. Yet this vindication is not your primary reward. It is merely a byproduct of alignment, because the true elevation lies in the rooms you now enter. Together, networks expanding, conversations deepening, influence broadening, and you are not there as a shadow but as a sovereign in your own right. Your partner amplifying rather than eclipsing your voice, celebrating your growth as enthusiastically as their own. And your visible partnership becomes a beacon for others who have almost given up on sacred union, proof that waiting on divine timing and doing inner work yields tangible reward. And beyond romance, your legacy begins to take shape not only in businesses built or art created, but in the invisible ripples you send into culture, inspiring standards, to rise, inspiring others to seek authenticity over convenience, demonstrating that power and tenderness, ambition and spirituality can coexist. And generational impact emerges from this alignment, because children, mentees, communities influenced by your union, witness a model of partnership rooted in sovereignty and respect. And in this kingdom of two, you understand that love is not the end of your journey, but the activation of your next level, the beginning of reign rather than retreat. And the ripple that began as subtle synchronicity now expands into sustained influence, proving that destiny, when honored, does not merely satisfy the heart, but reshapes the world around it.